The grand halls of the Zelvari Empire shone like a dream. Tall, elegant towers of silver and glass touched the sky, glowing softly under an artificial sun. The air smelled of rare flowers, and the streets were filled with music so beautiful it made hearts ache. For centuries, the Zelvaris had ruled over the galactic community with pride. They were tall, slender, and breathtakingly beautiful. Their skin shimmered like polished gems, their voices were smooth as silk, and their minds were sharper than any known species. To them, perfection was not a goal, it was their birthright. And then the humans arrived. Captain Elias Grant stepped out of the shuttle, his boots clicking against the marble floor of the Imperial spaceport. He was an average-looking man by human standards, strong, but not overly muscular, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. Behind him, a small team of human diplomats followed, their expressions a mix of awe and determination. The Zelvaris watched them from a distance, their expressions unreadable. Their golden eyes flickered with curiosity, amusement, and a hint of disdain. Humans were a young species in the galaxy, barely out of their own solar system. Compared to the Zelvaris, who had lived for thousands of years, they were little more than children. Lady Saphira, one of the high-ranking members of the Empire, stood at the entrance, dressed in flowing robes of silver and blue. She was considered one of the most beautiful beings in the galaxy. Her long violet hair cascaded down her back like liquid silk, and her golden eyes studied Elias with a look of mild interest, as if she were observing an unusual animal. "You are the human representative?" she asked, her voice smooth but emotionless. Elias smiled politely and gave a slight bow. "Captain Elias Grant, representing Earth and the United Terran Federation. It's an honor to be here." Saphira tilted her head. "Honor?" She glanced at the other Zelvaris around her. Some chuckled softly, others smirked. "That is an interesting word. We are not sure what honor your people believe they bring." Elias kept his expression calm. He had heard about the Zelvaris before arriving. They saw humans as nothing more than an amusing curiosity, useful, perhaps, but far from their equal. He knew they expected him to be overwhelmed by their beauty, their technology, their culture. Instead, he simply said, "We bring curiosity. We bring the desire to learn. And perhaps in time, we bring something you didn't expect." A murmur ran through the Zelvari crowd. Some raised an eyebrow. Others smiled, entertained by his confidence. Saphira's lips curled slightly in amusement. "Very well," she said. "You will be treated as honored guests, but do not mistake hospitality for equality." Elias nodded, unfazed. "We'll see." As they walked through the city, his team marveled at the wonders around them. Towering sculptures carved from floating crystals, gardens where the plants sang soft melodies, buildings that changed shape like living creatures. It was unlike anything found on Earth. But Elias noticed something else. Every Zelvari they passed held their heads high, moving with an effortless grace. There was no hesitation in their steps, no uncertainty in their eyes. They believed without question that they were the finest beings in existence. Elias had seen this kind of arrogance before, on Earth, in the history books, in leaders who thought themselves untouchable. And he knew one simple truth: arrogance always created blind spots. That night, at a grand banquet held in honor of the visiting delegates, Elias and his team sat at a long, gleaming table while the Zelvaris presented their finest food and entertainment. The hall was filled with laughter and music, but beneath it all, Elias could feel the unspoken challenge in the air. At one point, Saphira raised her glass, her golden eyes locking onto Elias. "Tell me, Captain," she said smoothly, "what do humans consider their greatest achievement?" Elias placed his glass down and leaned forward slightly. "Adaptability," he answered. "We change, we learn, we evolve. No matter the challenge, we find a way." Saphira smiled as if indulging a child. A charming thought. "But tell me, can adaptation create true greatness, Or is it merely survival in disguise? Elias met her gaze without flinching. Sometimes survival is greatness. The room fell silent for a moment. Then a soft chuckle rippled through the Zelveri nobles. They weren't mocking him, at least not entirely. Some seemed genuinely intrigued. Scifi studied him for a long moment, then placed her glass down. "Very well," she said. "Let us see if humans are as adaptable as you claim. Tomorrow, we shall test this theory." Elias smiled. He had expected this. "Looking forward to it," he said. As the banquet continued, he noticed something strange. Some of the Zelveris were watching him differently now. Less like an amusing creature, and more like an unexpected variable. And in the depths of her golden eyes, Lady Scifi looked curious. For the first time, a human had caught her interest. And that was the first step. The grand halls of the Zelveri Palace were filled with soft, golden light as Captain Elias Grant walked through them the next morning. The air smelled of exotic flowers, and the distant sound of soft music echoed through the walls. The palace was a masterpiece, designed to impress, to remind everyone who stepped inside that the Zelveris were the greatest civilization in the galaxy. Elias, however, was not here to be impressed. He and his team were escorted into a massive chamber, where dozens of Zelveri nobles stood in elegant circles, watching with curiosity. At the center of the room, Lady Scifi stood tall, her violet hair shimmering in the light. Her golden eyes focused on Elias with something different than before. Not just amusement, but a hint of interest. "You spoke of adaptability," Scifi said, her voice calm but sharp. "You claim that humans find a way, no matter the challenge." She raised a delicate hand. "So, let us test that claim." Elias nodded, already expecting this. What kind of test? A small smile played on Scifi's lips. "A fair one," she said. "A contest of mind, body, and spirit." The nobles murmured in approval. Zelveri culture valued perfection in all things: intelligence, physical strength, and inner discipline. No species had ever matched them in all three. They were certain humans would fail. Elias smiled slightly. "Sounds interesting." A tall Zelveri noble stepped forward. He was lean but strong, his golden eyes gleaming with arrogance. "I will represent the Zelveris in the first challenge," he announced. Elias looked at Scifi. "And what is the first test?" She gestured toward a grand table where a holographic display flickered to life. "A battle of intelligence," she said. "This is Valar, a strategy game that requires logic, memory, and foresight. It has been played for over 1,000 years in our empire. No outsider has ever won against a true Zelveri strategist." Elias glanced at the glowing board, filled with strange symbols and shifting pieces. He had never seen this game before. He could feel the weight of the noble's confidence, the silent expectation that he would fail. Elias pulled out a chair and sat down. "Let's play." The game began. The Zelveri noble played with swift, calculated moves, placing his pieces in patterns Elias did not fully understand. The crowd watched in amusement. The human would be crushed in minutes. But Elias did not panic. He studied the board carefully, analyzing the patterns. He knew he couldn't match the noble in pure experience. This was a game the Zelveri had mastered for centuries. But experience wasn't the only advantage in a game. Adaptability was. Instead of following traditional strategies, Elias played unpredictably. He made strange moves, unexpected sacrifices, choices that confused his opponent. The noble hesitated, frowning as he tried to understand Elias's tactics. The game lasted longer than anyone expected. Minutes passed, then an hour. The murmurs in the crowd changed from amusement to surprise. The noble's perfect strategy had been disrupted. He tried to adjust, but Elias was always one step ahead, never predictable, never easy to control. And then, in a final move, Elias trapped his opponent's most powerful piece. The noble's face paled. The board flashed red. The human had won. Silence filled the hall. Elias leaned back in his chair and smiled. Good game. The nobles whispered among themselves, stunned. Sci-Fi, for the first time, looked truly intrigued. She stepped forward slowly. That was unexpected. Elias stood up. Humans don't always follow the rules, he said. Sometimes we make new ones. Sci-Fi studied him for a long moment, then turned to the crowd. The first challenge goes to the human. There were murmurs of disbelief, but no one protested. The noble who lost stood up, his face unreadable. Perhaps there is some merit to your species after all, he admitted grudgingly. Elias chuckled. That's a good start. But the test wasn't over. Sci-Fi turned to another noble, a tall, muscular Zelvari warrior, his golden eyes gleaming with confidence. The second challenge, she announced, will be one of strength. The warrior stepped forward, rolling his shoulders. He was a trained fighter, his body enhanced by Zelvari science. I hope your species is as strong as it is clever, he said with a smirk. Elias cracked his knuckles. Guess we'll find out. The nobles cheered in excitement. The first test had been shocking, but surely, in physical strength, the Zelvaris would prove their superiority. Elias, however, wasn't worried. He knew strength wasn't just about muscle. It was about endurance. It was about willpower. It was about never giving up. And humans. Humans were very, very good at that. As the next challenge prepared to begin, Elias saw something interesting in Sci-Fi's golden eyes. For the first time, she wasn't looking at him like he was just an amusing creature. She was looking at him like he was a real competitor. And that was exactly what he wanted. The energy in the grand hall shifted as the second challenge was announced. The nobles, who had been murmuring in disbelief after Elias's victory in the strategy game, now smiled with renewed confidence. Intelligence was one thing, but physical strength. That was where the Zelvaris would surely dominate. Elias stood across from his new opponent, a tall and powerfully built Zelvari warrior named Kalvar. His golden eyes gleamed with certainty as he stretched his arms, showing off his impressive physique. His muscles were defined, his posture relaxed but full of confidence. The Zelvaris were naturally strong, their bodies enhanced by centuries of genetic perfection. This will not take long, Kalvar said, smirking. Elias simply smiled. We'll see. Lady Sci-Fi raised a hand, and a massive door at the side of the hall slid open. The nobles turned toward it eagerly as two floating machines entered, carrying a large, shimmering platform. It was a gravity dual ring, a training device used by the Zelvari warriors. The challenge was simple. Both contestants would stand on opposite sides of the ring, and the artificial gravity would increase over time. Whoever remained standing the longest would win. Elias stepped onto the platform, feeling the floor shift slightly under his feet. It was smooth and metallic, reflecting the golden lights of the hall. Across from him, Kalvar cracked his neck and stood tall, his confidence unshaken. Sci-Fi's voice rang through the hall. The challenge begins now. A soft hum filled the air as the gravity increased. It started slow, barely noticeable. Both competitors stood firm, their expressions unreadable. Elias controlled his breathing. He had been through military training back on Earth, and he understood how to endure physical stress. The key was pacing yourself, knowing when to exert energy and when to conserve it. He let his body adjust to the weight, keeping his muscles relaxed but ready. Kalvar, on the other hand, stood proudly with his arms crossed, making no effort to adjust. He was strong, stronger than Elias by far. To him, this was effortless. The gravity increased again. Elias could feel it now, a slight pressure on his chest, a heaviness in his legs. He shifted his stance slightly, distributing his weight more evenly. He glanced at Kalvar, who still looked completely at ease. More minutes passed. The gravity intensified. The first signs of strain appeared on Kalvar's face. His muscles, though powerful, were rigid. His stance was wide and unyielding. He had not adjusted, he had only resisted. Elias, meanwhile, bent his knees slightly, allowing his body to move with the weight rather than fight against it. He controlled his breathing, keeping his energy steady. The gravity increased again. Kelevar's breathing grew heavier. His body, despite its strength, was beginning to struggle. The Zelveri were used to controlled, optimized training. But humans were built for endurance. Elias kept his expression calm, though he felt the growing pressure in his bones. He had trained under harsh conditions before, running for miles with heavy equipment, surviving extreme environments. His body knew how to push past limits. Kelevar gritted his teeth. His legs shook slightly. The nobles watching from the sidelines started to murmur. The gravity increased again. Kelevar exhaled sharply. His knees buckled, and he dropped to one leg, his hands pressing against the platform for support. Elias, still standing, wiped the sweat from his forehead. His arms and legs ached, but he wasn't done yet. Kelevar growled in frustration. He tried to push himself back up, but the weight was too much. With a final grunt, he collapsed onto both knees, gasping for breath. A chime echoed through the hall. The gravity slowly returned to normal. "The human wins," Saphira announced, her voice carrying the hint of surprise. A hush fell over the room. The nobles, once so certain of their superiority, now looked at Elias with something different, something closer to respect. Elias stretched his arms and rolled his shoulders, ignoring the ache in his muscles. He walked over to Kelevar, who was still kneeling, trying to catch his breath. Elias offered him a hand. Kelevar hesitated, then took it. Elias pulled him up. "You fought well," Elias said simply. Kelevar looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You as well, human." The nobles whispered among themselves. The first challenge had been surprising. But this was undeniable proof that humans were more than just fragile creatures. Saphira stepped forward, her golden eyes locked onto Elias. This time, there was no amusement in her gaze, only curiosity. "You have proven your intelligence," she said. "You have proven your endurance, but there is one more challenge left." Elias raised an eyebrow. "What kind of challenge?" Saphira's lips curled into a small smile. "The greatest one of all," she said. "A test of spirit." Elias tilted his head. "And how do we test that?" Saphira's eyes gleamed. "You'll find out soon enough." The hall filled with anticipation. The humans had already done the impossible twice, but the final test would be different. It wouldn't be about strategy. It wouldn't be about strength. It would be about something far deeper. And Elias was ready. The grand hall of the Zelveri Palace was silent as Lady Saphira stepped forward. The nobles, who had watched Elias win 2 challenges, now waited eagerly for the final test. Elias stood tall, though his muscles still ached from the gravity duel. He met Saphira's golden gaze, sensing that this last challenge would be different from the others. "You have proven intelligence," she said. "You have proven endurance. But these are things that many species can achieve. The true measure of a being is not just mind or body." Elias tilted his head slightly. "Then what is this final test about?" Saphira's lips curled into a knowing smile. "It is a test of spirit." A soft murmur passed through the nobles. This was the most important challenge in Zelveri culture. It was not about strength or strategy. It was about something deeper. Elias remained calm. "And how do we test that?" Saphira raised her hand. The floor beneath them shifted, and a section of the hall opened, revealing a hidden doorway. A cool breeze flowed from within, carrying the scent of water and earth. "This," she said, "is the Chamber of Truth." Elias's team exchanged glances. This was something unexpected. Saphira continued, "The chamber is an ancient trial, one that even some Zelverists struggle to pass. It is not a test of power, but of the soul. Inside, you will face something only you can see. It will challenge you, not with weapons, but with what lies within you." Elias frowned slightly. "So, this is a test against myself." Sapphira nodded. In a way, yes. Elias sighed and rolled his shoulders. All right, let's do this. The nobles whispered as he stepped toward the chamber entrance. The doors slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor leading into darkness. You must go alone, Sapphira said. Elias nodded. Without hesitation, he stepped inside. The doors sealed behind him. Inside the chamber, the air inside was different. Thicker, almost heavy. Elias walked forward carefully. The corridor widened into a vast open space, but there were no walls, no ceiling, just endless blackness. It was as if he were standing in a void. Then suddenly, a voice spoke. You are weak. Elias tensed. The voice sounded familiar, too familiar. A figure stepped forward from the shadows. It was himself, but different. The other Elias looked worn, tired, and full of doubt. His uniform was torn, his face covered in scars. His green eyes, once sharp and determined, now looked full of uncertainty. You think you are strong, the other Elias said, but deep down, you know the truth. Elias stared at his own reflection. He had faced enemies before, aliens, warriors, impossible odds. But this was different. I know why you're here, the other Elias continued. You want to prove that humans are equal to the Zeldaris, but what if we're not? Elias clenched his fists. I don't believe that. The other Elias took a step closer. Are you sure? Look at them. They are faster, stronger, more advanced. They live longer. Their civilization has stood for thousands of years. And humans? He shook his head. We're still fighting each other. We still struggle to survive. What if we will always be less? Elias exhaled slowly. He understood what was happening. This was the test. It wasn't about proving himself to the Zeldaris. It was about proving himself to himself. Elias stepped forward. You're right about one thing, he said. The Zeldaris have had thousands of years to perfect themselves. They are stronger, faster, and more advanced. The other Elias smirked. So you admit it. Elias shook his head. No, because you're wrong about what makes us strong. The other Elias frowned slightly. Elias took another step forward. Humans aren't perfect. We make mistakes. We struggle. But do you know what sets us apart? Silence. We never stop pushing forward, Elias said. His voice was steady now, confident. Every species in this galaxy had a head start on us. But we adapt. We learn. We never accept limits. The other Elias flinched, as if the words physically hurt him. Elias continued, That's why I'm standing here. That's why humans made it to the stars. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we refused to stop. We endure. A crack formed in the void. Light seeped through the darkness. The figure in front of him began to fade. The other Elias gave a small, sad smile. Then prove it. The darkness shattered. The chamber opens. Elias gasped as light surrounded him. He blinked and found himself standing at the entrance of the chamber. The doors slid open. The nobles stared at him in silence. They had all seen the test before. Some Zeldaris had failed. Even those who passed often came out shaken. But Elias? He stood tall, his expression calm. Lady Sapphira stepped forward. For the first time, there was no amusement in her gaze. No arrogance, only something rare among the Zeldaris. Respect. You have passed, she said softly. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nobles still looked doubtful, but many nodded in agreement. Sapphira raised a hand, silencing them all. Humans have proven themselves worthy, not just of intelligence or endurance, but of something far greater. She looked directly at Elias. You have proven the strength of the human spirit. Elias exhaled. He had done it. The nobles, one by one, lowered their heads in acknowledgement. Even Kelvar, the warrior he had defeated, gave him a respectful nod. Elias smiled slightly. Guess that means we passed your test. Saphira chuckled softly. You have done more than that. She extended a hand. Welcome to the stars, Captain Elias Grant. As Elias shook her hand, he knew this moment would be remembered. The day humanity proved that they were not inferior. The day they took their first step towards something greater. And the day the galaxy learned a simple truth. Humans never stop. Elias stood in the grand hall, surrounded by Zelvari nobles. The air in the room had changed. The arrogant smiles had faded, replaced by quiet curiosity and respect. Lady Saphira, the one who had first dismissed him, now stood before him with thoughtful eyes. You have done what many thought impossible, she said. You have proven that humans are more than what we believed. Elias nodded. He was exhausted, his muscles still aching from the previous trials, but he stood tall. He knew what this moment meant, not just for him, but for humanity. The Zelvaris had always looked down on humans, but now they had witnessed something new, something they could not ignore. Saphira gestured toward the gathered nobles. You have passed our 3 tests, mind, body, and spirit. And now the final decision must be made. Elias raised an eyebrow. Final decision. She nodded. The tests were only to see if you were worthy, but to truly stand among us, there is one last step. Elias glanced at his team. The humans who had been watching from the sidelines stood in tense silence. They had come here to prove themselves, to change how the galaxy saw them. And now, the moment had come. The council speaks. Saphira turned to the assembled nobles. We must vote. Shall humanity be recognized as equals among the stars? A murmur spread through the crowd. Some of the nobles still looked hesitant, but others seemed deep in thought. Then one of the elder nobles stepped forward. His name was Lord Varric, a powerful figure among the Zelvaris. His eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable. I admit, he said slowly, I did not expect this outcome. Humans are different from us. Elias remained silent, waiting. Varric's gaze locked onto him. But perhaps difference is not a weakness. Perhaps it is something to be respected. A few nobles nodded in agreement. Others still hesitated. Kelvar, the warrior Elias had defeated in the gravity duel, stepped forward next. I fought against this human, he said. I felt his endurance, his willpower. He is not weak. Elias smirked slightly. That was as close to a compliment as he would get from a Zelvari warrior. Finally, Saphira spoke again. Then let us vote. She raised her hand. Those in favor of recognizing humanity as equals, raise your hands. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, one noble lifted their hand. Then another, and another. One by one, the hands went up. Elias held his breath. When the last hand was raised, Saphira turned back to him. Her golden eyes held something different now, something like admiration. It is decided, she said. Humanity shall no longer be seen as inferior. Elias exhaled, a small smile forming on his lips. He had done it. A change in the stars. The decision spread quickly. The other nobles accepted the outcome, even those who had doubted. The humans who had watched from the sidelines let out quiet cheers, their faces filled with pride. As the crowd began to disperse, Saphira approached Elias. You are an unusual man, Elias Grant, she said, and an unusual species. Elias chuckled. That's what we do best. She tilted her head slightly. You have won our respect. But I wonder, what will humans do with it? Elias looked around the grand hall, at the powerful beings who had once dismissed him, now seeing him as an equal. He met Saphira's gaze. We'll keep pushing forward, he said simply, because that's who we are. Saphira smiled. Then I look forward to seeing what humanity will become. As Elias stepped away, he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger world. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Elias Grant walked through the polished halls of the Zelvari Palace, his mind still processing everything that had happened. Humanity had been recognized as equals, something unthinkable just days ago. And yet there was still a lingering tension in the air. He could feel the eyes of the nobles watching him as he passed. Some were filled with curiosity, others with quiet respect. But a few still held doubt. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, caught up with him. "That vote was close," she whispered. "I don't think everyone's happy about it." Elias nodded. "Yeah, we changed their minds, but we didn't change their hearts. That'll take time." Before she could respond, a Zelveri attendant approached. "Captain Elias Grant, Lady Saphira requests your presence in the royal chamber." Elias exchanged a glance with Sarah. Then, with a steady breath, he followed the attendant. An offer with a price. The royal chamber was smaller than the grand hall, but no less impressive. Golden pillars lined the room, and a massive window overlooked the city below. Saphira stood near it, gazing at the stars. "You called for me," Elias said, stopping a few steps behind her. She turned, a strange expression on her face, somewhere between amusement and seriousness. "Yes, I wanted to speak with you privately." Elias crossed his arms. "All right. What's on your mind?" Saphira stepped closer. "You have done what no human has ever done before. You have gained our respect. But respect alone is not enough in this galaxy." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Meaning?" She gave a small smile. "You fought hard to prove humanity's worth. But now, you must defend it." Elias felt a weight settle in his chest. Defend it? From what? Saphira's gaze darkened. "Not all Zelveris agree with the Council's decision. There are some, powerful ones, who believe that we made a mistake." Elias clenched his jaw. "Let me guess. They don't like the idea of humans being their equals." Saphira nodded. "They see humans as a threat, and threats are eliminated." Elias let out a slow breath. He had expected resistance, but not this quickly. "So what are you suggesting?" She hesitated for only a moment. Then she said, "Join me." Elias blinked. "Excuse me." Saphira's voice remained steady. "If you truly want to secure humanity's future, then you need allies. I can protect you. I can ensure that those who oppose this decision do not act against you." Elias studied her carefully. She wasn't just speaking as a noble. She was speaking as someone with power. "And in return?" he asked. Saphira smiled. "In return, I ask for your loyalty. I ask that when the time comes, humanity stands with me." Elias's instincts flared. This wasn't just about protection. This was about politics. Saphira wanted to secure her own power, and she saw humanity as a useful tool. But was that a bad thing? Elias considered his options. If he refused, he would be leaving humanity vulnerable. But if he accepted, he would be tying humanity's fate to Saphira's ambitions. It was a dangerous game. The choice. Elias paced for a moment before stopping to face her. "You're asking for a lot." Saphira tilted her head. "Am I? I offer safety. I offer influence. In time, humanity could rise higher than you ever imagined." Elias frowned. "Or we could just be pawns in someone else's war." Saphira chuckled softly. "You are smarter than most, Captain. That is why I offer you this chance." Elias sighed. He didn't like this. He didn't like being pushed into a corner. But he also knew one thing. Humanity wasn't ready to fight alone. Finally, he looked her in the eye. "I won't promise loyalty, but I will promise cooperation, as long as it benefits both sides." Saphira considered his words before nodding. A wise answer. She extended a hand. "Then let this be the start of something powerful." Elias hesitated for only a moment before shaking her hand. It was done. But deep down, he knew that this was just the beginning. The real battle, the one for humanity's future, was only getting started. Shadows in the dark. As Elias left the chamber, Sarah was waiting outside. "Well?" she asked. Elias exhaled. "We just made a deal with the queen." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Good or bad?" Elias smirked slightly. "Ask me in a few months." They started walking back toward the human quarters, but neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows. A Scifi noble, his expression cold and calculating. As Elias disappeared down the hallway, the noble turned away, whispering into a hidden communicator. "The human is dangerous. We must act soon." The transmission ended, leaving only silence. Elias Grant stood on the balcony of the human quarters, staring out at the glowing city beneath him. The night sky was filled with ships, their lights blinking like distant stars. A few days ago, humanity had been seen as nothing more than an insignificant race. Now, everything had changed. But Elias knew victory wasn't permanent. Power shifts, alliances break, and enemies never truly disappear. A soft sound behind him made him turn. Sarah Hayes stepped forward, her expression tense. "We have a problem." Elias sighed. "Let me guess. The ones who didn't like the vote." She nodded. "We intercepted a message. Some of the nobles are planning something. We don't know what, but it's happening soon." Elias ran a hand through his hair. Of course, they wouldn't let this go so easily. Sarah leaned against the railing. "We should leave, Elias. Get back to the fleet while we still can." Elias shook his head. "Running won't change anything. If we leave now, they'll use it as proof that we were never worthy in the first place." Sarah exhaled. "Then what's the plan?" Elias turned back to the city, his mind working fast. He didn't know what the nobles were planning, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let humanity's future be decided by someone else. The trap is set. An hour later, Elias and his team stood in the main hall, waiting. Scifi had called for a final council meeting, and the room was filled with nobles. Some looked pleased, others wary. Elias scanned the faces carefully. Somewhere in this room were the ones who wanted to remove him. Scifi entered, her golden robes flowing behind her. She glanced at Elias briefly before addressing the room. "Tonight, we gather to confirm humanity's place among the stars," she said. "But before we do, there is something that must be addressed." Elias tensed. Was she about to expose the plot? Before she could continue, a loud voice interrupted her. "This is a mistake." Everyone turned. A tall noble stepped forward, Lord Varric. His sharp eyes were filled with disdain as he glared at Elias. "We have let our emotions blind us," Varric continued. "This human has fooled us with tricks and brute strength, but that does not make him our equal." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some nobles nodded in agreement. Others remained silent, waiting. Scifi's expression remained calm. "And what would you suggest, Lord Varric?" Varric smirked. "A final challenge, one that will settle this matter once and for all." Elias crossed his arms. "Another challenge. Didn't I already prove myself?" Varric's eyes gleamed. "You proved you could fight. But can you lead?" Elias frowned. "What are you talking about?" Varric gestured toward the window. "Outside this palace, in the lower districts, there is a riot. Some of our people believe the council's decision was wrong. They are angry, uncontrolled." Elias narrowed his eyes. "And you expect me to fix it?" Varric smiled. "If you truly believe humanity belongs here, then prove it. Go down there and restore order without violence." A dangerous gamble. Elias glanced at Scifi. Her expression was unreadable, but she gave him a small nod. This wasn't just about proving humanity's worth. This was a trap. If Elias failed, they would use it as proof that humans were too weak to lead. If he used force, they would call him a barbarian. It was a no-win situation. Elias sighed. "Fine, I'll do it." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Elias, this is insane. They want you to fail." Elias gave her a reassuring look. "Then we don't give them what they want." Into the chaos. The lower district was nothing like the palace. The streets were filled with angry Zelveri citizens, their voices echoing through the air. Fires burned in the distance. Elias walked forward, his team close behind him. The crowd turned as they approached, their eyes filled with suspicion. A large Zelveri stepped forward. "This is your fault, human," he growled. "Because of you, everything is changing." Elias kept his hands at his sides. "And is that a bad thing?" The Zelveri narrowed his eyes. "We do not want change. We do not want your kind here." Elias took a deep breath. "I get it. You're scared. You think I'm here to take something from you." The crowd muttered. Some looked uncertain, others still furious. Elias raised his voice. "I fought to prove that humans aren't weak, but that doesn't mean we want to rule over you. We just want a place in this galaxy, same as you." A Zelveri woman in the crowd stepped forward. "And what if we don't want you here?" Elias met her gaze. "Then I won't force you. But think about this. If we can fight this hard to prove our worth, imagine what we can do if we fight together." Silence filled the street. Then, slowly, the tension started to fade. Some of the crowd stepped back, their anger cooling. Others still looked uncertain, but they weren't shouting anymore. Elias knew he hadn't won them all over, but he had done enough. The riot was over. The final decision. Back at the palace, the nobles were waiting. Elias walked in, his expression calm. Saphira looked at him. "It is done." Elias nodded. "No violence. No deaths. Just words." Varric scowled but said nothing. Saphira turned to the council. "Then let it be known. Humanity has earned its place." The vote was cast. This time, there was no hesitation. It was unanimous. A new beginning. Later that night, Elias stood once again on the balcony, looking at the stars. Sarah joined him. "We did it," she said. Elias nodded. "Yeah, but this is just the start." Sarah smirked. "Think we'll survive?" Elias chuckled. "We're human. We always find a way." As he looked at the vast galaxy before him, he knew one thing for sure. Humanity's journey had just begun.